So this event is taking place as part of an Austrian initiative, Rio+20 Fairness in a Finite World, through which Austrian environmental and development NGOs want to raise awareness on the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, which will take place in 1 month in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, where the United Nations will gather political leaders from around the world in order to renew international political commitment to sustainable development policies. So we take the occasion of this important UN conference for presenting you today a small but very interesting panel of experts which will take stock on what has happened in the tourism sector in the last 20 years with regard to sustainable development. So I want to thank our cooperation partner, the MODUL University Vienna, as well as our supporting partners, the Austrian Development Corporation and the EU, and of course, last but not least, our panelists and our moderation for enabling this discussion evening to take place. And I want to introduce you to Ms. Dagmar LUND-DURLACHER, here in the middle, which will lead us through this evening. Ms. LUND-DURLACHER is the Dean of the BBA program for Tourism and Hospitality Management here at MODUL University, and she has been dealing with sustainability issues in tourism since a long time already. And besides many memberships to scientific organizations, she's also involved in different initiatives on sustainable tourism. For instance, she is chairing an international education network on sustainable tourism, which is called BEST-EN, and she's also part of the advisory board of TourCert, which is a certification, CSR certification initiative for tour operators. So I'm happy to hand over the word now to Dagmar, and I wish you an interesting and enlightening discussion.
Yes, for this warm welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to MODUL University and to our discussion here today. It's a great pleasure to have you here. And we have a very interesting topic, actually, which we'd like to address today. The topic of today's discussion is: has tourism become more sustainable during the past 20 years? And we have the opportunity to discuss this with two very well-known experts in the field of sustainable tourism. The occasion why we meet here today, and Andreas already mentioned it, is the 20th anniversary of the so-called Earth Summit, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which took place in the 1992 in Brazil. This Earth Summit actually is regarded as an important milestone for the integration of environment and development issues in the international policy agenda, and was the basis for some important international conventions and programs such as the Agenda 21 or the UN Millennium Development Goals, or the Framework Convention on Climate Change, Convention of Biological Diversity, and many more. So it's really regarded as a milestone to bring sustainability and sustainable development on the international policy agenda. This year in June, there will be again a conference in Brazil, the Rio+20 conference, United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. And this conference is planned on the highest possible level, so there will be heads of governments and authorities meeting, and many representatives of NGOs and other organizations are expected to participate. The aim of this Rio+20 conference is to renew the global efforts towards a more sustainable future, and the conference is being promoted as an historic opportunity to define pathways to a safer, more equitable, cleaner, greener, and more prosperous world for all. Before we start the discussion, please, I would like to take the opportunity and introduce you and give you a short overview about the importance of tourism for our global economy. And we have some figures which actually show, next one please, which show how important tourism has become over the past 20 years or 50 years actually for the global economy. So in the year 2012 we will reach 1 billion international tourism arrivals. So that's a milestone in tourism activities, tourism arrivals. The average growth rate for international tourism arrivals was around 4% each year, so it steadily grew over the past 25 years. And tourism nowadays contributes 5% to the world's GDP and provides 6 to 7% jobs worldwide, directly and indirectly connected to tourism. So these figures show how important this sector is for the global economy. Now, please the graph. No, the other one. Just wanted to show you the importance and the arrivals, the international tourism arrivals by region, because there you can see on this graph that the most or the majority of travel takes place in Europe. And that also the highest increase of tourism arrivals is expected for Europe till 2020 and for Asia. So in 2020 we expect to have about 1.6 billion tourist arrivals, which is a significant number. So it's unquestionable that tourism contributes lots to the global economy. But tourism is not only a very important global economic sector, it also creates significant ecological, social and cultural pressure for the host communities. We have increased garbage and sewage, rising energy consumption and related pollution issues. We have increased surface consumption, loss of biodiversity, also negative social effects arise, such as loss of values and effects of acculturation, financial and sexual exploitation of the host population is a often mentioned negative impact by tourism activities. But tourism often is used as an instrument to develop rural areas and stimulate the economy of the host communities. This not always only contributes to a good economic development, but also has negative impacts on the economy, such as rising prices and high demand for local infrastructure investments. So these are the negative impacts which are related to tourism activities, but on the other hand, we need the intact nature, we need beautiful landscapes, we need the cultural heritage, we need foreign cultures which can be within a sound infrastructure, which are representing the core elements of the tourism supply side. So we have to maintain this tourism supply elements in its nativeness and quality in order to enable tourism to contribute and to a prosperous economic activity. So as a consequence of this, tourism has to be managed in a sustainable way. So this sustainable development, the Rio Summit or the Rio Conference in 1992 is accepted, or after this Rio Conference, sustainable development was broadly accepted among tourism stakeholders as a policy aim. And promoting sustainable tourism or sustainable development is also a central task in the mandate of the United Nations World Tourism Organizations, which now leads me to introduce our panelists. And I would like to introduce first Mrs. Eugenio YUNIS, which has been involved with the UNWTO for many years. So Mr. YUNIS obtained a degree as civil engineer from the University in Chile and a master in development economics of the University of Grenoble. He has been involved in tourism policy and development issues since 1980. Firstly as a consultant for a London-based firm, then as a chief for technical cooperation with the World Tourism Organization. With the return of democracy in Chile, he was appointed Director General of Tourism in the government. In 1997, he went back to Madrid to serve as Director of the Department of Sustainable Tourism Development at UNWTO until 2007, and then became Director General for Program and Coordination until 2010. From March 2010 till now, Mr. YUNIS is Executive Vice President, CEO of the Federation of Tourism Enterprise of Chile. Welcome, Mr. YUNIS. Then I would like to introduce our second panelist. It's Mr. Manfred, who is the president of Naturefriends International. It's a short description of your career, if you allow. Mr. Bills graduated he has 2 degrees, one in computer science from the Vienna University of Technology and one in social science from the University of Vienna. And Mr. Bills has been in green tourism policies and activities of NGOs since 1981, so a very long career in this field. First, as an employee of the Austrian Naturefriends Organization, then from 1993 to 2003 as Secretary General of Naturefriends International, and which counts amongst the oldest and largest non-governmental organizations in the world. In this position, he actively championed socially and environmentally friendly tourism for years, especially on the European level, and now you are the president at Naturefriends International. Welcome to our discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we can start. I have read a personal question at first. So, personally, how do you remember 1992 and the Rio Earth Summit, Mr. YUNIS?
Well, sorry. Now, I remember, good afternoon everyone, guten Abend I should say, but my German doesn't go much further than that. So. I remember it somehow sadly because tourism was not in the agenda at Rio 1992. Nobody talked about tourism. It was only, as Manfred remembers, it was a few years later that firstly 2 organizations, the UN World Tourism Organization and the World Travel and Tourism Council, which groups a number of large companies in tourism, that decided to translate the Global Agenda 21, which had been defined at Rio in '92, to translate it, not from a language point of view, but to translate it to tourism. So it was Agenda 21 for travel and tourism. It was defined around 1995. And then the Commission for Sustainable Development of the United Nations, which was created in '92, decided to devote one session, I think it was 1998, if I remember well, 1998, they said, well, let's discuss tourism. So that's when I was at that time working at the World Tourism Organization, and Manfred was with Naturefriends International, we went there, and it was really the first official meeting handling tourism issues from the sustainability perspective. So since then, many things have passed, of course. There was intensive work at the international level between the World Tourism Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme, supported by a number of NGOs from all over the world, some national NGOs and some international NGOs. And I think when we reached Rio+10, which took place in Johannesburg in South Africa, then we were really in a position to include tourism in the agenda. And there was a conference just before Rio+10, which took place at Cape Town in South Africa. We had hundreds of participants there. And then during Rio+10, the second Earth Summit also called, tourism was debated, and there were, in the final resolution at Johannesburg, there were at least 6-7 articles dealing with tourism or mentioning tourism. So that's, I'll leave it there, not to occupy the whole panel, but answering your question, Dagmar, Rio in '92 somehow ignored tourism. And the change from Rio to Rio+10 in 2002 was very big, because many NGOs, many international organizations, and also the private sector, some companies had already taken the issue of sustainability, and we could manage to include it in the debates with governments, heads of states, and so on.
How was it with you?
I mean, for 1992, I can say, is it working?
No, you switch it on.
I have to do as it is because it's.
Okay, now that's better. Yes, I would like to start earlier because I started working with Friends of Nature in 1981, and I didn't realize that, but in 1980 Robert Jung coined this expression of sanfter Tourismus, soft tourism. At that time, honestly to say, I didn't know what it meant with it, but already in 1981, 82, Nature Friends of Germany wrote a book, Soft Tourism is the tourism which is made by Nature Friends, because it's tourism only done without machines and motors, so it's just using muscles. And he said, this is the tourism which is really soft and green. And I was impressed by this book, I would say. And I think it took not very long time when we tried to develop how to be more soft at that time, so because sustainable was not coined at that time, how to be more soft in environmental friendly, with nature, with cycling, hiking, skiing, and also we had some, we call it clever hiking, clever traveling, and such things. And we also developed a scheme, and this was launched firstly at 1989, which is called Landscape of the Year. So where we devoted, we selected every 2 years a certain landscape, and then we tried to talk about tourism, and today we will say, and I think from 1993 on we said it, about sustainable tourism in this region, and it was a major focus of this project. And I remember as well that already in 1991, the Nature Friends founded an organization which was called Ecological Tourism in Europe, ÖTE, Ökologische Tourismus in Europe. And the main focus of this organization was to develop this so-called green suitcase, green koffer. So it was the first trial to have a sort of certification scheme for activities in tourism, for tourism hotels and tour operators and so on. I have to say it failed, but it was really a very good way how to develop the whole concept. And yes, 1992 was, as you said, Eugenio was not really a date for us. It was an international conference on sustainable development. Of course, we realized the Agenda 21. This was the major outcome. We thought about how to translate the Agenda 21 into tourism, but we had not the feeling that this was an international tourism activity. And I think it took really some time until we found out that, okay, there will be an occasion which is the CSD7, and I guess it was in 1999, on sustainable tourism, where tourism is on the focus of the Commission of Sustainable Development, and then we prepared a position paper on European level. Friends of Nature, all organizations said, okay, we want to say something there. And I traveled to New York, and I think this was the first time I was there, and I met Eugenio as well. It was a big experience, and then I learned immediately that Friends of Nature are not, well, Nature Friends are not the only ones to dealing about that. There was a side conference of NGOs, and there were, I think, 300 NGOs of all over the world present, and it was really impressive to see, I'm not the only one. And I think from that on, there was a big coalition of NGOs contributing to all those conferences. And Rio Plus 10 was also something where we issued the so-called red card for tourism, because we were really anxious that it would not come on the agenda. Not sure whether we contributed that it could come to the agenda, but I think the World Tourism Organization did also a lot in order to achieve that. So I think we were active. So this is my experience with 1992.
It seems that you were quite alone in the beginning, yes, so it took a while till you found coalition partners. How was the debate at those time, in this time, among public authorities, politicians, the industry? Have you been perceived as, some kind of idealists which were not taken serious, or was there already a serious debate going on?
Who should start?
I can start.
You start.
I have the feeling that especially at these international conferences and the Agenda 21 and the Rio conferences had changed the world a little bit, because it was it was a sort of takeoff of the NGO development. Yes? And I think we were listened very much. I had the feeling that the governments listened to NGOs, but of course the rules which you make on the international level are always limited. So it's very often much paperwork, yes? And you have to try that it comes down to implementation and to real policy. But on the international level, it's more or less, yes, we have to agree on something, we have to discuss it. It was a very good discussion, I think, and I think already at that time, at least for 1999, we had all elements of sustainable tourism on the table, which are now common knowledge. Yes? So that hasn't changed a lot. Yes? Perhaps the distribution has changed, but not the concept.
Yeah, I think the beginning, it was somehow difficult to move governments to take up the issue of sustainability in tourism. And I think it is still difficult. Yeah? Now, 2012, it is still difficult, because if you look, I've been, because I work at this World Tourism Organization for many years, I've been to many countries dealing with ministers in charge of tourism, and their main preoccupation always is to increase the number of tourist arrivals. That's how they can show results, and I put the inverted commas. results is growth in the number of arrivals. That's typical for any government all over the world, or more or less for any government. Now, to start back at the end of the last century, 1998, 99, 2000, to start introducing the concept of sustainability with government, it was a difficult task. But when there is a UN document talking about sustainable tourism, then governments start thinking, there is a fashion, I hope it's not a fashion that is last forever, but some governments say, I have to introduce this issue there. So there is progress in that respect. Governments, after the CSD 7, 1999, and especially after 2002, the Rio Plus 10 in Johannesburg, they wanted to be fashionable, and I'm saying it a bit sarcastically here, they wanted to be fashionable, and you start looking at many countries' strategies or development plans for tourism, and they all have the name sustainable tourism or sustainable development of tourism. And that is some progress. It's not, of course, as we would like it to be, but at least it's a step. And similarly within the private sector, there is a very good coalition of tour operators. They call TOI, Tour Operators Initiative for Sustainable Tourism. And that is a group of, I think nowadays, 25 very large tour operators committed to sustainable tourism. It was created back in 2001. Some of them hesitating whether to join or not, but it became a very strong organization until today, more than 10 years. They have a code of practice, and then other tour operators start looking at them and they say, we have to be also more sustainable. So all this has led to much better tourism, not generally for all tour operators, but much better operation by many tour operators. And I don't want to say that we are nowadays with a sustainable tourism society, not at all. But at least thanks to these various actions by NGOs, by the World Tourism Organization, by UNEP, by a group of tour operators, we have made some progress that wouldn't have been if these initiatives hadn't taken place. The road ahead is still very big, and every day it's a more difficult road because the number of tourists keep growing. Today we have many new countries, China, Russia, India, Brazil, and many developing emerging economies which are growing at 10 or more % per year, the number of tourists. And what can you do? Stop them to travel? I mean, it's like today tourism is part of everyone's consumption pattern. It's very difficult to stop it in a free society. Perhaps there could be means to stop it in another type of society, but we want to keep free society. So the road ahead is very big, and it's perhaps more difficult today with the various financial crises that we have been living since 2008 until now, particularly Europe, the States, and so on. So this makes the task of achieving sustainable tourism more difficult than perhaps 10 years ago.
So you would say the Rio 1992 conference was a start for many initiatives which took place later. So actually it was a process of a long time period that sustainable tourism got a topic within the policy agenda and among the associations, organizations dealing with tourism. So what do you think, what were the achievements of becoming more sustainable in the tourism? Because you mentioned tourism became more sustainable during the past years. So what do you consider, what did the tourism industry really contribute to this sustainable development?
Well, I see two different issues, and I'm glad you mentioned the contribution of tourism to sustainable development. There is, on the one hand, making tourism more sustainable as an industry, but also how tourism contributes to a sustainable development of the entire society. And I think this second part has not yet been fully addressed, or let alone achieved. The first part, I think we have today a much more conscious hotel industry to start with. Many environmental practices have been introduced in the hotel industry throughout the world. Leading countries, one of them I think is Austria, the Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Australia have been leading countries in introducing environmental measures in hotels to reduce energy consumption, to reduce water consumption, to separate garbage in different types, to recycle, etc., etc. I think that's a clear achievement. There are also in the social field many actions to prevent damage to cultures, particularly in less developed societies, or to contribute to poverty reduction through tourism. There is a program that we launched some 8 years ago, 2004, called STEP, Sustainable Tourism for the Eradication of Poverty. That's a program that has focused mainly in Africa and Central America, with specific projects to help local people set up their own tourism businesses, and that is also a contribution. This is still minor, it could have been grown faster, but there are a number of initiatives also to protect cultural sites that are demanded by tourists, and there have been methodologies for handling visitors at national parks or cultural sites throughout the world. So there have been a number of contributions, but again, not as quickly and not as universal as we would like it to be. But that there have been progress, I think, yes.
So what do you consider the biggest progress?
Difficult to say, the biggest progress. The biggest progress is perhaps that today there is awareness, at least there is, I think, massive awareness, not massive application of this awareness, but there is awareness about the need to be more sustainable in tourism. We need to develop more awareness to the fact that tourism can contribute and should contribute to global sustainable development. That is something that we still have in the agenda. But at least awareness on the need to be more sustainable in tourism, I think, is quite massive. I can see it even in, as Dagmar mentioned, I'm back in my home country, and I travel to very remote places in Chile, and everyone is asking, how can we be more sustainable? Small hotels here, small tour operators there. So there is awareness even in the most remote places throughout the world. That is something I think to be thankful of.
Thank you. I would like to pose this question also to you, Manfred. What achievements could be made during the past 20 years?
Yeah, honestly, saying I'm not so optimistic than Eugenio. I mean, we have achieved a lot of awareness raising, something, it doesn't like me that much. This is perhaps also not better.
No? Okay. Oh. Magic behind it? Okay. So I think we achieved a lot in awareness raising among consumers, among NGOs, I think even among governments, especially on national and international level. But I have to say that this is the implementation is of course rather vague. Yes? So we can see that European countries with old tradition of tourism find out that perhaps there is one sector which is mass tourism, which is needed for them and for their economy, and then to try to develop another sector, an additional sector, which is a new sector, which is the so-called sustainable tourism destinations. And I see that clearly in all Western countries, that this is sort of to develop a new niche sector for additional tourism, which is attracting more people, which have more awareness about environment, and which like to have a sort of quality tourism. But I have to say, in my mind, it's more a niche sector. And when Eugenio is saying that tourism industry and many ministries and governments are in favor of sustainable, yes, you're completely right. They say it's modern. It's more like a way of marketing. Yes, so we want to be in the mainstream of the discussion, and we want to show that we can fulfill all these requirements. But I'm really hesitating to say the word, but there is a lot of greenwashing in it again. Yes, so we have to be careful to be too optimistic. And even if we look at today, yes, we have now a real stagnation of all those issues. I mean, we had a lot of projects till 5 years ago, and all those projects stopped, I would say, because at the moment we have a financial crisis. In the financial crisis, of course, the income of tourism is something where you attract foreign money, so it's something which helps governments in order to overcome this financial crisis. And we had a really embarrassing discussion at the Durban conference and the Climate Convention conference in Durban, where we really had the discussion: can we really implement an emission trading for aviation, which would be perhaps harmful for some developing countries because they would have higher costs for the flights. And I think this is completely going in the wrong direction, because the lion's share of tourism is of course located in the Western countries, in Europe, in Canada, in the US. You have shown it in Asia. So these are countries which can afford it. And it's only 1.2% of tourism which is happening really in developing countries. So for those countries, we could have had other solutions instead of saving the whole aviation sector from the emission trading system, just because this could be harmful for a very small percentage of tourism. And I think this is the climate we are acting at the moment. And there you can see then the reality of the very good theory. I mean, I agree completely that we have at the moment all knowledge at hand, and Eugenio said it before, and I use it now, that we have all technologies, we have all schemes at hand, we know how to organize a sustainable tourism, but unfortunately it does not really happen.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that even the sustainability concept is still seen from an economic perspective? See, talking about greenwashing, so that sustainability and the sustainable tourism concept is used for marketing purposes rather than really being an underlying philosophy.
We have to really be very careful to generalize generalize too much, you know. So it's, you cannot say it's sustainable, it's not sustainable. I mean, there are sectors like the nature parks and national parks, and all those nature protected areas, which took on the ideas of the climate, of the Convention on Biological Diversity, and implemented very good schemes for sustainable tourism. I think this is something that you can see all over Europe, at least. Yes, and there are other sectors which are continuing the normal tourism activity they had in the past. Yes, so it's always going in parallel, and at the moment I have the feeling that the sector of sustainable tourism was growing until 3 years ago, but now there is, I have the feeling that there is stagnation at the moment.
Because of the financial crisis and the economic situation.
If I may add, I think there is a bit of, certainly, there is some greenwashing just to appear as more sustainable. I was firstly answering your question, progress made, but I'm also very critical about various issues. There are compensation, CO2 compensation schemes. There are a number of tour operators, perhaps a large number of tour operators offering sustainable tourism packages, but the demand is not prepared to pay more for it. So that is also a fact. And I think I agree with Manfred in that in spite of the know-how developed, in spite of the availability of many techniques for environmental improvements, or for social improvements, or for corporate social responsibility, which is also part of the sustainability agenda, not many companies, not the majority of companies, are applying these techniques. So if we look at the drawbacks, there is certainly a lack of a massive application of all these techniques, and the financial crisis is now stagnating the progress that had been made before. So when will the industry resume this? I've been faced with many private operators that they ask me, well, you're promoting these sustainability issues. What will be the return to my company? What will be the financial benefits to me? And that's a difficult question, because you don't see the results immediately. Sustainability is a long-term, fairly long-term issue for the benefit of society in general, not necessarily for the immediate benefit of a private company. So when you have an economic crisis, it is certainly more difficult to advance with sustainability.
Okay, so do you see opportunities which have been missed out in the industry to become more sustainable?
Definitely, yes. Yes, I think at a time of rapid growth, it would have been the right time, the right opportunity to make faster progress. But I think the consumers perhaps were not that aware, were not that demanding, and I wonder whether the current rapid growth of tourism consumption from China or from Russia is really demanding sustainable tourism, because the awareness in those countries is lower than it is, for instance, in Europe. So opportunities missed, definitely, particularly in the beginning of last century. At the beginning of this century, in the years 2000 to 2005, when the economy was fairly stable and growing all over, we missed the opportunity.
you see that the same way, or which opportunities have been missed?
I'm not sure whether the tourism industry would say that they have missed some opportunity, because as Eugenio completely correctly referred to, is that for them the growing income is the major target. Yes, and this is, we cannot close the eyes from that this is some tension between the concept of sustainable tourism and the real practical tourism. How should I say? We need more or less who are the only people who are interested in a sort of sustainable life. I think it's the people at the destinations living there. It's perhaps some consumers, but when we look at the normal tourism development, and you have a cycle, you have just to find a new destination, it's developed, it becomes mature, and then it's degradation. Look, some places in Austria exist as well, where we know that tourism is already over. Yeah? And what is there left? And I think there, the politicians are the only ones who really should look into the future and say, okay, what is our future development? Do we want that the regions are exploited for short-term benefit, of short-term profit? And afterwards, we are left over with the problems and have to pay for people who are unemployed and so on. Yes? So I think there we need a thorough discussion and democratic discussion on national level in order to secure a sustainability that will say not only of tourism. This concerns the whole sustainable development. Mm-hmm. And I would not blame industry for following its profit. This is the target of industry. If you say they should not do it, okay, then you have to abolish, for example, capitalism. Yes? Mm-hmm. So that is something which we also could follow. Yes, it would be an alternate concept. But if you say yes, we want to have this way of development, then we have to create some limits to the development, which might be not in favor for some industry, but is perhaps in favor of a sustainable development of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have different stakeholders in the tourism system, like the consumers, the businesses, the industry, the policymakers, NGOs, media, and so on. How did they take responsibility for sustainable development in the past 20 years?
Perhaps those who have done most is in the academia, in the field of research. As we mentioned before, there has been a lot of progress, a lot of research. The number of articles, studies, and books on sustainable tourism has grown exponentially. So there you have a good body of knowledge, and I think academia all over the world took up the responsibility. Governments have, we are run by politicians. I hope there are no politicians in this room. We are in all countries run by politicians. They have a 4-year or a 5-year term. They want to show results. And I'm currently, although I'm working with a private sector federation, but I'm fighting with our Minister for Tourism in Chile to show him that it's not 4 years the target. They want to grow in such a number to the year 2014 because there are general elections. I say, look, your target should be 2020. That's when we can see real results. So politicians, sometimes they do it because it's fashionable, as I said before, because it looks nice to talk about sustainability, but it's not always the case. In some cases, and I know countries, examples, Costa Rica, New Zealand, even in Africa, Botswana. Botswana is not going for large numbers. they really understood that if they wanted to benefit their population, they went for a very slow growth and very focused strategy in some places in the country to grow sustainably, as opposed to Kenya or Tanzania or Senegal, which went for big numbers. So there are cases. Costa Rica is another case of countries that understood, the politicians understood that if they didn't go for sustainable tourism, they wouldn't benefit their population. And then the private sector, I still believe, it's not massive, definitely, but I still believe that some companies are really doing well. There is the Scandic group of hotels, which I think now is within the Accor group of companies. The Accor group, you probably know their commercial names, Sofitel, Novotel, Ibis. They really have a very stringent, sustainable management of the hotels, from the construction to the environmental aspects within the hotel, energy, water, and so on. So there are...
Do you not think that this is quite natural? Because in this sector, in accommodation, sustainability and environmental friendly policy saves money.
Right, it saves money, but if it saves money and is environmentally friendly, so much the better. But they do it. And I think they also have policies for hiring local people instead of bringing managers from outside the country. In tour operating is a bit more difficult. But again, there are these, as I mentioned before, the Tour Operators Initiative. And this group also have very, they have to put up products which are a combination of hotels, transport, and so on. And they have a checklist for selecting the hotels, for selecting the airline, for selecting the local transport people, and so on. So I think, acknowledging that it's not massive, but there is some good examples that have to be reproduced and applied more by all companies. But I think there are a number of good examples.
Yeah, would you like to add something with that? Just comes into my mind, tour operators. It's really, the initiatives for the tour are very complex, and there is a German initiative established 2-3 years ago, the Tour Cert, which is a certification scheme which takes into account the whole supply chain, which is especially trickier for tour operators to consider that and to follow up. And so there are many initiatives established and still growing. So what about the framework conditions for sustainable development in tourism? How did this change from 20 years ago till now? Like policy, regulations, and so on. Did this change? And how did it change?
Tourism benefited there from the overall framework conditions concerning sustainability. We have a lot of environmental laws. We need environmental authorization for construction, for example. We have energy saving, we have waste reduction, and all those issues. This is something which is a kind of logical development in our life, which is needed for our sustainability, and tourism profits from that. And I think it's something which we have to increase. I think that tourism is depending on other sectors, transport, environment, spatial planning, for example. And if we try to be sustainable in this order, to increase the sustainability in the sectors, tourism will become also more sustainable. This is my idea. To blame tourism as the only economy to be more sustainable is perhaps not really helpful. Yes? So, tourism needs a lot of conditions, and we can try to improve the conditions.
There's often said that tourism could act as a role model for green economy or for sustainable development. We shortly addressed this already, yeah? So what is your opinion about that? Could tourism act as a role model for sustainable development?
It serves to educate consumers in many respects. Sociologists have studied the behavior of tourists when they are in a different country, and somehow they found that when we are tourists, because we are also tourists at one period of our lives, we have an open mind. We can concentrate on appreciating things that otherwise we wouldn't see in our everyday life. So it's a good time to become acquainted with social issues, with cultural, appreciating other cultures, understanding that people that we thought were perhaps inferior because of a lower development, economic development level, and we appreciate their cultures, their ways of life, and so on, and especially educating on environmental issues. When visiting a national park, if the national park is well equipped for guiding the tourists, for explaining what type of ecosystems there are there, what are the risks of intensive use of those ecosystems and so on, the risk to biological diversity, to the extinction of some species. So it's a good time to educate tourists. Now, this is somehow role model, but I wouldn't say that tourism is a role model for other industries. That is, I think, a bit ambitious, but it can serve to educate tourists in many fields, cultural, environmental, and social issues.
You talked about these interdependencies.
Now I'm a little bit less critical than Eugenio, because I have the feeling that there is, of course, an interdependency between tourism and the normal life, but today people tend to have a better quality of life. They want to have local food, they want to have a friendly, a nice landscape, they move out of the cities in order to be in green environment. So people have a feeling what a sort of more environmental friendly tourism could be like. Yes? And I think there is an interdependence, so that they learn something from tourism. The tourism learns from people. So I think there I wouldn't say it's a role model. It's interdependent. Yes. So one from each other. Yeah. Concerning experience, I think it's nature protection experience. There we have developed a scheme which is called Naturefriends. So we develop trails into nature in protected areas and provide people not only with the nature experience but also with the knowledge about the species which are living there and why they are living there and what is the reason for them. And they can experience them. And I think this is very successful. So we have about 100 nature trails already all over Europe. So then you can see that the nature protection and tourism is not excluding each other. It could be integrated. Yes.
So it's interdependency between the sectors, and you can learn from each other. What do you think, or what do you see as the current key challenges for sustainable development in tourism? Sustainable tourism development to become a sustainable economy or green economy. What green economy is today?
I mean, there are a lot of issues. I think the most important issue is transport, because if you look at the tourism service chain, then you have the transport, and when you look at the overall tourism, then, for example, aviation is contributing 40% to the CO2 emission of the whole tourism sector. That's only of the tourism sector, not of the whole world. And then I think accommodation is only 21%, and activities at the destination is only 4%. So you know that you have to tackle this aviation issue. This is what a car transport is 32%. So it's also a big issue. I mean, there we have now new technologies at hand. E-mobility, for example, if it is of course delivered by renewable energies. But you can offer the tourists the same comfort with better technology. So there is a big demand. The other point is, I'm talking more about the European tourism, because this is my real conviction. I think this is the most important issue, that most tourism happens in the Western world and is created by the Western world. So we have to take up responsibility there. I completely agree that tourism in developing countries is also a major issue, but I think this is we have bigger problems than tourism, honestly speaking. Yeah? So it's not the only one. But we are responsible for most of the tourism, and it's our need which we develop there. So it's the need of the Western people to have more tourism because of their living environment, because of their living situation and so on. So there I think we have to achieve something, and perhaps one second part after transport is how we can overcome this seasonality, so that we have just seasonal destinations where people are half the time unemployed, which is not really helpful for the living of people. So I think there we could do a lot, but I can see this is the same like with accommodation. In accommodation, if you do something, you immediately create value for your business, yes? And seasonality is the same. So if you create more activities also in other seasons, of course you have a better economic benefit. That's why I don't doubt that the industry is following this route. We just have to find the tourists seeing this development and accepting it. Yes. So.
Yeah. So what about changing the behavior of the tourists? I mean, they have been stakeholders.
Yes, it's precisely in addition to the transport issue, which goes beyond tourism, is a much bigger issue. I think that the main challenge is to change the behavior of tourists. If we manage to have tourists that really they are really concerned about the impacts they generate, that will push the supply side, the private sector, and governments in addition, that will push them to improve their operations in all respects. I think the lack of consumer pressure for more sustainable operations in the tourism industry is a major challenge. And if we had the consumers pushing for this, I think we'll get better progress. Now, how can this be overcome? Probably support by government to those companies that are more sustainable than others, because of course there are companies which operate in a better way. Stimuli or financial support to companies who have got either in promotional terms or in other ways, tax relief to companies who operate in a more sustainable manner, so that they get preferred by the consumers, and that, so to create a virtuous circle from the demand side. If there is no pressure from the demand side, the industry will remain, why should I bother? If I have to invest in more sustainable operations and I don't get the result in economic terms, they will remain as they are. So I would say that a big challenge is to have a more demanding tourist all over the world, particularly where the major originating countries, and Europe as a continent is one of those. US, Canada, Japan, but now also China. And that is a very big challenge. China is already generating 50 million outbound tourists going abroad. 50 million. That's more than Germany. The Germans abroad, I think, is 45, 46. China, in a very short period of time, moved from being a very low destination, firstly, to be the third one now, and also a major emerging sort of outbound tourist country. With last year, I think, was 50 million, and it will grow very rapidly. So.
We know that awareness and willingness to buy sustainable tourism products is really increasing, but the behavior is not really changing. So do you have any strategies in mind how we could do this? It's more information, providing more information strategy, for example.
Yeah, information before the trip and information during the trip, both are very important for improving the behavior of tourists.
And although I am an NGO, yes, so I live from information to people and education, yes, so this is our job. But I am not really convinced that we would manage to change the attitude of masses of tourists. Yes, so that's something which might be a good excuse to do nothing, to say, okay, we have to change it to the people. I think the real role is in political regulation of certain issues of our life, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So if you don't have solutions on political level which regulate the issue for tourists and for industry, I think we will not have a sort of positive development. You cannot change, because the tourist is leaving his home, he's going abroad. So his interest on the destination abroad is just to experience it, but he is not really interested that it has a sustainable survival. He will go next day to another destination. If the first destination is too mature, he will choose the next one. Yes, so the tourist has always an alternative. Yes, and the tourism industry has always an alternative. But the local destination has no alternative. They have to survive. Yes, so therefore I think we need a discussion more on how we can have smooth regulation in order to guide the tourism in that way that it secures the sustainability of destinations.
So you're not very optimistic about the responsibility of the consumers in general?
I'm completely optimistic that the consumer who experiences something in his own life has awareness. Yes? But when he consumes something, I think there is not much awareness.
Can I ask a question now? Don't you? I agree with you. I think regulation is needed, but in a way, isn't this part of the overall change that we are experiencing in our society today? I mean, the financial crisis, wasn't it the result of lack of regulation to the financial institutions and banks?
Exactly.
For many years, we were told by politicians that we needed less state, but now we're seeing that state is necessary, and I think is the same trend in tourism. So it's a difficult point. I see it outside the tourism sector. I think we are in a very, I don't know whether to call it difficult, but certainly, I don't know whether it's in English is inflection point. Do you get the meaning? Inflection point in our society today. We are moving from very liberal capitalist society to a society where we need more regulations. Otherwise, the world doesn't work. We are seeing that too liberal society in business or on environmental issues or on labor issues or educational. It doesn't work. I think we need more state, in other words. Not to go to a communist type regime where everything is regulated by the state, but more than in the last 10 or 15 years.
This was not a question, this was an addition.
Well, yeah, I put it as a question because I'm not 100% sure myself, but I think we are at an inflection point in our society, definitely.